Rupa.
Hi everyone. I know that some of the people that have approached me about this draft bill are worried that cultural diversity, experimentation, innovation could potentially suffer by bits that aren't mentioned in here. So clause 1, it sort of defines the remit of public service broadcasting, and it updates the old section 264 in the Communications Act 2003 that went on about how cultural activity in the United Kingdom should be reflected with drama, comedy and music, and all this stuff's been deleted and in the current new clause 1 of this draft bill. I know you're not exactly public service broadcasters, but Sky News has some aspects of that because it is sort of free for everyone. You have shown some sport events for free. I just wondered if you had any comment on that, because some people think this is quite sinister that all these cultural activities have been deleted. And does it mean that on-demand services and public service are merging into the same thing?
So I think from a Sky perspective, you're quite right to note that Sky News is free to air. We also made Sky Arts free to air in 2020. It has a reach of around 5 million people now, and the level of challenging and culturally reflective programming on there is, I think, possibly unequalled by any other linear TV service that is out there at the moment. Earlier this year, we launched Sky Kids, which I mentioned earlier, which is our dedicated kids channels. It's ad-free and contains lots of our original productions. So from a Sky perspective, lots of the output, and sorry, that is completely ignoring all of the drama, comedy, documentaries, etc., that we also produce from a Sky perspective. We spent more than 500 million on original UK productions last year, and we do it because we know that it's what our audiences expect and what our audiences value. So from a Sky perspective, we very much feel like we're delivering public service type content, even though we're not a public service broadcaster and don't receive the regulatory benefits that the PSBs do. So I think the one point that I would make on this is that the early part of the bill is designed to give the PSBs a greater level of flexibility in how they meet their obligations. They also get benefits throughout the bill in terms of on-demand prominence, in terms of listed events, and various other things that Ofcom are considering at the moment. So I think it is incumbent on policymakers to ensure that they get their money's worth, as it were, from the PSBs as a result of this. There's a series of benefits that the PSBs are receiving here, and I think it's perfectly legitimate for policymakers and audiences to ask, what is it that we are getting in return? You know, what is the programming that you're going to be delivering, and what is the way that you're going to be delivering to that makes sure that it is broad enough for audiences and reflective of people's individual experiences.
People who've spotted that sort of national, regional, local news have all been deleted from this new draft bill. Will Sky News show those sort of things?
So I mentioned earlier that Sky News is editorially separate, so I can't necessarily speak directly for them. I suppose at the moment, both BBC News and ITV News provide local services. They do so on a sort of subsidised basis, the licence fee for the BBC and regulatory subsidies for ITV, and so that's quite a difficult market to crack. What I would say is that Sky has a long history of covering the most important nations and region development in as effective and efficient way as possible, and also remembering that Sky News has a commitment under the undertakings of the Comcast purchase in 2018 to continue to provide the current level of service with rising budgets through till 2028.
So things like also documentaries on Sky Arts will continue, because people are worried there's no genre mentioned here.
Absolutely. And from our perspective, you know, something like Sky Arts is something that we very much leaned into because we spotted an area in the market that wasn't necessarily being provided for. And so, you know, that is a dedicated 24/7 arts channel available free to air. We think it is a totally unique offering, and as such it works for us both commercially but also because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, just to the other two, do you think that this bill gives sufficient protection for companies to continue to innovate while meeting must-carry obligations?
We welcome continued investment in British content. We've actually co-produced over 25 co-productions with the public service broadcasters already. Those include the likes of Fleabag, The English and Good Omens, and we really look forward to sort of further investing in the UK. Hopefully you might have seen our news last week that we've invested £4 billion in the UK creative industry since 2010, and really look forward to sort of furthering that investment longer term in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we don't have a view on the detailed provisions in the legislation. I think that's a question first and foremost for the broadcasters. But, you know, I think as a more general point, and you know, to return to your question about whether there is convergence sort of going on in terms of public service and private media, you know, I think one of the great strengths of the UK historically has always been that it is a mixed ecology. And, you know, from Netflix's perspective, the UK is one of our most important markets around the world, our second biggest market in terms of production. We spend $1.5 billion here every year on a whole range of different content, and it's also one of our most important markets from a membership perspective as well. And, you know, we greatly value our relationships, both commercial and creative, with the public service broadcasters. I think what's important from audiences' perspective is that there is as much choice as possible, and that what we all kind of offer is complementary, to some extent differentiated, and really extends and broadens out the choice for audiences here. So to the extent that we can preserve that, ensure both that public service broadcasters continue to be sustainable and that we can all contribute slightly different things, you know, that should always be the end goal. And so I think the legislation should obviously be drafted with that ultimate objective in mind.
It's a draft bill. I think there's a lot of people hoping music, comedy, drama, those things go back in for the PSBs. My other question was, I don't know if anyone studied the dispute resolution framework. Do you think it's sort of fit for purpose? There are admissions we've had that say it's too long, 4 months. Medium, the modern world moves faster than these timescales. Anyone?
Yeah, so I think, as I mentioned earlier, the key element for us is that a threshold for a referral to Ofcom is high, and I think the bill gets most of the way there, so I think that's fine. Ofcom, I think, also has the power to be able to direct on an interim basis, and I think that's critical. So the 4 months from end to end, Ofcom could still put in place interim measures that allow the content that you're talking about to still be available on the platform in question. And so I think that, you know, Ofcom, I used to work at Ofcom and do telecoms disputes, and you need a long period of time, right, on some of these things. And so, you know, it needs to take the appropriate period to gather all the facts, but it definitely has the ability to make sure that things happen on an interim basis. But to return to my earlier point, you know, we think there's a very clear path for Ofcom to be able to set out what it views as, you know, the way that it will generally resolve a dispute, i.e., you know, not requiring payment on either side, making sure the content is available prominently, and that should probably serve to both reduce the number of referrals that they have in the first place and also shorten any subsequent dispute resolution process that they're overseeing.
Just to echo Ali's comments, but it's really important from our perspective that the dispute resolution is really reserved for the deals that really require Ofcom's attention, and that's why we would really welcome Ofcom creating a set of specific criteria that one or more parties needs to meet before they can refer a deal to Ofcom.
Anything on disputes resolution?
It's not an area where we have a view. It doesn't affect us directly.
Thanks.
Thanks, Rupa.